My parents used my college savings to pay for my golden child sister's down payment on her house. I'm a 20-year-old college student, or at least I was growing up. My parents always promised me they'd help with my college expenses. I worked hard, got good grades, and was accepted into a decent university. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. I was excited about my future and grateful for their support. My older sister, let's call her Lisa, has always been the golden child in our family. She's 4 years older than me and has always been my parents' favorite. They spoil her rotten and bend over backward to make her happy. Lisa was the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. I was the quiet kid who loved books and excelled academically, but never quite. Lisa recently got married to her long-term boyfriend, and they decided they wanted to buy a house. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough for a down payment. My parents, eager to help their favorite child, took the money from my college savings account, the one they'd been contributing to since I was a kid, and gave it to Lisa for her down payment. Just like that, my dreams of a debt-free college education vanished. When I found out, I was devastated. I confronted my parents, expecting them to understand how much this meant to me and to apologize for their decision. Instead, they tried to justify it by saying that Lisa needed the money more than I did. They said that I could always take out student loans and pay them off later, and that they would try to help me out with the loans when they could. But why should I have to go into debt? Because they decided to prioritize Lisa's needs over mine? Lisa, of course, is completely unapologetic. She thinks she's entitled to the money and doesn't see why I'm so upset. She even had the nerve to tell me to just get over it and focus on my studies. She and her husband are now comfortably settled into their new home. While I'm struggling to make ends meet, I've had to take on 2 jobs to try to make up for the lost money. But it's not enough. I'm constantly stressed out and exhausted, and my grades are starting to suffer. I used to be a straight A student, but now I'm barely passing some of my classes because I have so little time to study. I feel like I'm being punished for something that's completely out of my control. The worst part is that my parents don't seem to understand or care about how much they've hurt me. They keep brushing off my feelings, telling me that I'll understand when I'm older and that family comes first. But it feels like they only mean that family comes first when it comes to Lisa. I've tried to talk to them about how I feel, but every conversation ends in frustration and tears. My relationship with my parents is strained, and I can't even look at Lisa without feeling a mix of anger and sadness. It's like they've completely shattered my trust in them, and I don't know how to move past this. I've been confiding in my friends, and while they're supportive, they can't really do anything to change the situation. I'm constantly feeling isolated and alone, and the stress is really starting to take a toll on my mental health. I've been having trouble sleeping, and when I do, I often have nightmares about my future and the debt I'm going to be drowning in because of my parents' decision. As if things weren't bad enough, I recently found out that my parents had actually been dipping into my college fund for years. They had used it to pay for Lisa's extravagant high school experiences, including a luxury car for her 16th birthday, an expensive prom dress, and even a lavish graduation party. While I was working part-time jobs and saving every penny I earned, they were spending my future on her present. It felt like a punch to the gut, realizing that this betrayal had been going on for so long and I had been completely in the dark about it. One night, as I was walking home from my second job, I was mugged. I had my backpack with me, which contained my laptop and all my textbooks. The thief took everything, leaving me with nothing but a few bruises and a feeling of utter hopelessness. I reported it to the police, but they said there was little they could do without any leads. My parents' response? These things happen. Just be more careful next time. No empathy, no offer to replace what was stolen, just a cold dismissal of my trauma. Desperate to keep up with my studies, I turned to Lisa for help. I asked if I could borrow her old laptop, thinking it was a reasonable request given everything she had received from our parents. She laughed in my face and told me to figure it out on my own. I felt like I was drowning with no one to turn to for help. The stress and exhaustion finally caught up with me, and I collapsed in the middle of my shift one day. I was rushed to the hospital, where they told me I was severely dehydrated and suffering from extreme fatigue. While I was lying in that hospital bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let my parents' favoritism and Lisa's entitlement ruin my life any longer. I decided to take out a student loan and get back on track with my education, but I also decided to cut ties with my family. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when they had betrayed me so deeply. I moved out of my parents' house and found a small, affordable apartment near campus. It was tough at first, but with the help of my friends and some supportive professors, I started to get back on my feet. I also started seeing a therapist to help me deal with the emotional trauma. My therapist encouraged me to write a letter to my parents, not to send it, but to get all my feelings out on paper. I poured my heart into that letter, detailing every hurt and betrayal I had experienced over the years. It was cathartic, and I finally started to feel some semblance of peace. Just when I thought things were starting to improve, I received a call from the police. They had arrested Lisa and her husband for fraud. It turned out that in their desperation to maintain their lifestyle, they had been falsifying documents and committing various financial crimes to get loans and credit cards in my parents' names. My parents were devastated, not only because of the legal trouble, but because their golden child had finally shown her true colors. They came to me, begging for forgiveness and asking for my help in bailing Lisa out of jail. For the first time in my life, I stood up to them. I told them that Lisa's actions were not my responsibility and that they needed to deal with the consequences of their favoritism. I walked away from that conversation feeling a strange mix of sadness and empowerment. I was sad for the family I had lost, but empowered by the fact that I was finally taking control of my own life. I threw myself into my studies and my jobs, determined to build a future for myself. Despite the challenges, I graduated with honors and was offered a position at a prestigious company. I moved to a new city, far away from my parents and Lisa, and started a new chapter of my life. It wasn't easy, but I was finally free from the toxic environment that had held me back for so long. Years later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Lisa had served time in prison and was now working a low-paying job. My parents had sold their house to pay off the debts and legal fees incurred by Lisa's crimes. They were living in a small apartment, a far cry from the comfortable life they once had. I felt a pang of sadness for them, but I also felt a sense of closure. Looking back, I realized that their betrayal and favoritism had forced me to become stronger and more independent than I ever thought possible. I had learned to stand up for myself, to fight for my dreams, and to let go of toxic relationships. I had built a life for myself that I was proud of, and no one could take that away from me. I often think about what my life would have been like if my parents had treated me fairly, if Lisa hadn't been the golden child. But I also realized that those challenges shaped me into the person I am today, someone who is resilient, determined, and capable of overcoming anything life throws my way. And for that, in a strange way, I'm grateful. But the story doesn't end there. As I settled into my new life, I started to receive strange phone calls at odd hours. At first, I thought it was just telemarketers. But then I started receiving threatening messages. Someone was telling me to watch my back, that I would pay for abandoning my family. I changed my number, but the calls persisted. It was clear that someone was out to make my life a living hell. One night, my apartment was broken into and trashed. I was out at the time, but when I returned, I found my place in shambles. Everything was destroyed, and scrawled on the wall in red paint were the words, "You will pay." I reported it to the police, but without any solid leads, there wasn't much they could do. I was terrified and didn't know who to trust. I hired a private investigator to look into the threats. It took weeks, but eventually they traced the calls and the break-in back to Lisa's husband. He had blamed me for their downfall and was determined to make me suffer. I took out a restraining order against him, but the fear lingered. I moved again, this time to a different city, hoping to leave the past behind me. I changed my name and cut off all contact with anyone who knew me from before. I had to start over from scratch, but I was determined not to let fear control my life. Despite the constant fear, I threw myself into my work and started making a name for myself in my field. I became known for my dedication and hard work, and I quickly rose through the ranks. I was finally building the life I had always dreamed of, free from the shadow of my family's favoritism. But just as I started to feel secure, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Lisa. She had been released from prison and wanted to meet. She claimed she had changed, that prison had made her see the error of her ways. She begged for a chance to make amends, to rebuild our relationship. I was torn. I didn't want to open myself up to more pain, but a part of me longed for the family I had lost. After much deliberation, I agreed to meet her in a public place. When I saw her, she looked different. Gone was the confident, entitled woman I had known. She seemed broken, remorseful. She apologized for everything she had done, for taking my college fund, for the years of favoritism. She admitted that she had always known it was wrong, but had been too selfish to care. She told me about the horrors she had faced in prison, how it had made her realize what truly mattered. She begged for my forgiveness, tears streaming down her face. I listened, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and longing. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, forgiveness wasn't something that could be given so easily. It would take time, and it would require seeing real change in her behavior. She promised to do whatever it took to make things right. We parted ways with a tentative agreement to keep in touch. Over the next few months, Lisa made an effort to rebuild our relationship. I was torn. I didn't want to open myself up to more pain, but a part of me longed for the family I had lost. After much deliberation, I agreed to meet her in a public place. When I saw her, she looked different. Gone was the confident, entitled woman I had known. She seemed broken, remorseful. She apologized for everything she had done, for taking my college fund, for the years of favoritism. She admitted that she had always known it was wrong, but had been too selfish to care. She told me about the horrors she had faced in prison, how it had made her realize what truly mattered. She begged for my forgiveness, tears streaming down her face. I listened, my emotions a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and longing. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, forgiveness wasn't something that could be given so easily. It would take time, and it would require seeing real change in her behavior. She promised to do whatever it took to make things right. We parted ways with a tentative agreement to keep in touch. Over the next few months, Lisa made an effort to rebuild our relationship. She found a job and started paying back the money she had taken, bit by bit. She attended therapy and worked on becoming a better person, to see that she was truly trying to change. We started meeting regularly, and slowly, the wounds of the past began to heal. But life had one more twist in store for me. One day, I received a call from my parents. They had been in a car accident and were in critical condition. Despite everything, they were still my parents, and I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, they were both unconscious, hooked up to machines that were keeping them alive. I sat by their bedside, memories flooding back, both good and bad. I realized that despite the pain they had caused me, I still loved them. I whispered words of forgiveness, hoping they could hear me. They never regained consciousness. They passed away a few days later, and I was left to handle their affairs. As I sorted through their belongings, I found a letter addressed to me. In it, my parents apologized for everything. They admitted they had been wrong to favor Lisa and expressed their regret for how they had treated me. They wrote that they had always been proud of me, even if they hadn't shown it, and they hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive them. Today, I am in a good place. I have a successful career, a loving partner, and a circle of friends who feel like family. Lisa and I have rebuilt our relationship, though it will never be what it once could have been. We are both different people now, shaped by our experiences and the choices we have made. I have learned that life is unpredictable, and while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can choose how we respond to it.